Representative Al, if you would like to go ahead and start your presentation, I'll let you divide the time based on how you see fit.
Absolutely. I'll try to push this? Okay. Good morning. Thank you so much. I'll try to keep my part short so we can leave as much time as possible for testimony. Thank you for hearing HB 161, the Pediatric Health Safe Storage Act. The first thing I actually want to do is just to thank Chairman Saines and Chairman Collins for hearing this. Let me acknowledge something that most people in this room already recognize, is that your choice to hear this bill is really a testament to your openness and your leadership. So thank you so much for doing that. It's also a testament, I'd like to say, to the community advocacy and showing that it works to move the needle on these issues. So before we dive into this bill, let's talk a little bit about why we drafted it in the first place. So in 2020, firearms became the #1 cause of death for children and teenagers in the United States, and that's a statistic that really deserves not just notice, but action. Right? So studies show that suicides and unintentional shootings increase in homes where guns are kept loaded and or unlocked. We also know that when youth use firearms to commit violence against themselves or others, they almost always get these guns from their home or the homes of relatives or friends. The American Academy of Pediatrics has identified gun violence prevention as one of its top priority issues for those reasons, and one of the most effective ways to keep guns out of the hands of minors is safe storage laws, where gun owners are essentially required to lock up their firearms. So just some national studies have shown that safe storage laws can reduce suicide and unintentional gun deaths among children by up to 54%. So let me underline this point so we're clear about this. More than half the gun deaths in children and teens in this country could be averted by the safe storage of firearms. Right, so that's incredibly effective. Nationwide, there are 23 states that have adopted safe storage laws, including Florida and Texas. Yes, I said Texas. Georgia is not among those states. So what is the law right now in Georgia? Let's review that real quick. Georgia law does not expressly make it unlawful for an adult to negligently or recklessly leave unsecured firearms, including handguns and long guns, accessible to unsupervised minors. Georgia also generally does not require firearm owners to affirmatively lock up their weapons. So SB 161 addresses these two deficiencies. So let's walk through the bill real quick. I know everyone who presents the bill says, oh, this is such a simple bill, but it actually is, in fact, a simple bill. Let's just start with Section 2, which defines our terms. So if you go to lines 21 through 24, it defines a safely secured firearm as one where the owner, quote, takes steps that a reasonable person would believe sufficient to prevent access to a readily dischargeable, i.e. loaded, firearm by a child, including but not limited to placing a firearm in a locked container or temporarily rendering the firearm inoperable by a trigger lock or by other means. It also creates a charge of criminal negligence if a child gains access to a readily dischargeable firearm, with the exception of the situations outlined in lines 34 through 42, which you can take a look at. These include situations that we can imagine, like a child who's being supervised by a responsible adult using a firearm for the purposes of hunting, sporting, and the like. It also accepts cases where a minor might gain access to a firearm by entering a property illegally, in violation of the law. For example, if a minor illegally broke into your house and accessed your gun. A violation of this law would be considered a misdemeanor of a high and aggravated nature, punishable by a fine not to exceed $5,000. And essentially, that is the bill. And before I open for questions, let me just preemptively, just to save some time, answer some of the more common questions that I get. So the first question I get is, how would this law be enforced? So to answer that, let me draw an analogy to another pediatric public safety law, which is our car seat laws that we have. So in Georgia, just to review, all children under the age of 8 whose height is less than 57 inches must ride in the back seat of a car, and children under the age of 8 are required to be in either a car seat or a booster seat suitable for their age and height. This is just directly pasted off the Georgia State page. Now, how do we enforce this law? Do we have cameras in every car or surveil every car? Do we check every kid's age? Do we card the kids in the car and measure their height? No, we don't do that, right? But in the past few decades, where we have enhanced our vehicular safety requirements, we have created what I like to think of as a culture of safety, in which car seats and safety information and the specifics of car seat laws are ingrained with parents, right? You don't leave the hospital with a newborn, as many of us know, without demonstrating, bringing it in to the hospital that you have an appropriate car seat, right? At every single well child check that you go to with a pediatrician, we discuss and reinforce vehicular safety and the law. And if an adult is observed to be driving with an unsecured child not in a car seat or improperly secured, they are stopped and cited, right? So the second question is, why do we need this law when responsible gun owners secure their firearms already? Great point and great question. I agree that many responsible gun owners do already safely secure their firearms, particularly if they have children in the house, and that is great, right? I will point out, however, that most responsible drivers, like all of us here, right, so responsible, we don't drive at 120 miles per hour, and yet we still have speed limit laws, right? So what HB 161 would do is to clearly define the parameters of safe storage, and again, create this culture of gun safety where such storage practices are the norm. And this more easily allows us to teach outliers what responsible gun ownership looks like. So the third most common question I get is this bill constitutional? And this is a higher level question. This is why we have lawyers in the room. That refers back to a recent United States Supreme Court decision, which is New York State Rifle and Pistol Association Incorporated v. Bruin, which essentially stated that this is a newer ruling, so I'm just going to go through it, that only firearm regulations that have a historical analog from the 19th and 18th centuries, meaning at the time of our country's founding, would be considered constitutional in an originalist sense, right? So in short, a law banning, for example, assault rifles may be considered unconstitutional because there were no assault rifles in the days of Thomas Jefferson, right? So putting the logic of that ruling to one side, I have showed this bill to 2 constitutional law professors who assured me that a safe storage bill like HB 161 would still be considered constitutional because there is in fact a historical tradition of laws regulating how guns and ammo may be stored. There are a number of cases that I could cite to reinforce this assertion, which were furnished by Justice Breyer in his dissent from District of Columbia v. Heller. But in the interest of time, I'll just say if you want those citations and that case law, just reach out to me, and I will send you all those citations. So I'll just conclude by reiterating 3 points. Number 1, guns are the number 1 cause of death in children and teens in this country. Number 2, requiring safe storage of firearms is one of the most effective ways to decrease the chances that children and teens obtain unsupervised access to guns. And number 3, Georgia at present does not have a safe storage law. So in considering HB 161, we could change that and help create a broadly understood standard of gun safety culture that could mitigate preventable injury and the death of children. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions from the committee.
Thank you, Representative. Does the committee have any questions for the presenter? I will add, you did include it in your testimony, but I was running your previous mention. How many states did you mention had safe gun laws similar to this?
23.
23.
And there's a packet that should have been distributed that has all this information in it. I believe it is the 3rd tab, the yellow one, actually. Yes, it's the yellow one. There's a map of all the states that have safe storage laws at present. And there's also the blue tab should go through that list of states. Thank you for that question.
All right. Not seeing a question at this moment for the committee, we'll go ahead, and we do have a decent amount of public comments here, so we will go down the list.